Today, we'll go through the past perfect tense. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to answer the following questions. 1. What is the past perfect tense? 2. When do we use the past perfect tense? 3. How do we form the past perfect tense? As usual, at the end of the lesson, we'll go through some practice questions. What is the past perfect tense? We use the past perfect tense to show the sequence of two events in the past. In these instances, you use the past perfect tense for the earlier action in the sequence, and you use the past simple tense for the later action. If you need a refresher on the past simple tense, we'll link a video lesson in the description box below. Let's take a look at this sentence. By the time I arrived, Sarah and James had already left. So in this sentence, there are two events happening. Let's visualize this on a timeline. The first event is Sarah and James leaving. The second event is my arrival. Even though the events are listed so that my arrival appears first in the sentence, chronologically, it happens later. It happens after Sarah and James leave. So we use the past perfect tense for Sarah and James leaving because that happened first. We use the past simple tense for my arrival because that happened afterwards. We'll go through more examples, but first, let's talk about how we form the past perfect tense. We use this formula, had plus the past participle. For example, I had gone to work. One thing to mention about the past perfect tense and the past simple tense is that the verb stays the same regardless of the subject. In other words, we don't change the verb based on the subject as we do for the present simple tense, for example. So, let's go through an example. I had gone to work. You had gone to work. He, she, it had gone to work. We had gone to work. You had gone to work. They had gone to work. Notice the had gone remains the same for all subjects. In conversation or informal language, you can even use the contracted form. You can say, I'd gone to work, which is the same as I had gone to work. To form the negative, you would say, I had not gone to work, or I hadn't gone to work. Hadn't is the contracted form of had not. To ask a question using the past perfect tense, use this formula, had plus subject plus past participle. For example, had she gone to work? The verb doesn't change based on the subject. In the past perfect tense, the verb always stays the same regardless of subject. All right, let's return to a few more examples. Can you find the past perfect tense in this sentence? After I had finished my homework, I went out to meet my friends. Which event happened first? Well, I finished my homework first, and then I went out to meet my friends. Notice that we are using the past perfect tense when talking about finishing our homework. We used had finished, so that's a clue that this event happened first. Also, notice that we start with the word after, which tells us the order of events. We finished our homework first, and then we met up with our friends. By the time she arrived, the concert had already started. Can you identify the past perfect tense in this sentence? If you said the concert had already started, that is correct. The use of the past perfect tense tells us that this event happened first. She arrived afterwards, so we use the past simple tense to describe that event. Remember, both events occurred in the past. They had studied French for years before they visited Paris. Can you identify the past perfect tense in this sentence? It looks like the first part of the sentence uses the past perfect tense. They had studied French for years, so we know this event happened first, and then they visited Paris. Notice that the second part of the sentence, visiting Paris, uses the past simple tense, so that's a clue that this event happened later on the timeline. Another clue that tells us the order of events is the word before. They had studied French before they visited Paris, so they studied French first, and then they visited Paris. If you're still following after all these examples, great work. Let's move on. We can also use the past perfect tense to talk about time up to a certain point in the past. By the time she was 5, she had read over 10 books. In this example, we're talking about time up until she was 5 years old. By the time he reached the airport, the plane had already departed. In this example, we're talking about time up until he reached the airport, but this example is also similar to the examples we've discussed previously. There are 2 events happening, the earlier of which is the plane departing. The second event is his arrival to the airport. Until Amy saw the bird, she had never been so amazed. Again, we're talking about time in the past until the point that she saw this bird. We also use the past perfect tense in conditional sentences to talk about hypothetical consequences. As an aside, a conditional sentence is made up of 2 parts. It is made up of a condition and a result. The condition part of the sentence usually uses the word if or unless. The condition sets up a situation, and the result tells us what will happen if that situation occurs. For example, let's examine this sentence. If the stove stops working, we will eat out more. The condition is if the stove stops working. If this situation occurs, then the result will be that we eat out more. Notice, we are using the simple present tense in this sentence to talk about a future hypothetical scenario. However, we could have also used the past perfect tense in this sentence to talk about a hypothetical scenario in the past. We could have said, if the stove had stopped working, we would have eaten out. In this sentence, it sounds like we're talking about a one-time hypothetical episode in the past. If the stove had stopped working sometime in the past, the result would have been that we would eat out. Another example, if I had saved money, I would not be in debt. Had saved uses the past perfect tense. If I had driven to the store, I would have saved money on gas. Had driven uses the past perfect tense, so again, this is a hypothetical scenario in the past. I get the sense that the speaker is expressing regret. Lastly, we use the past perfect tense to express wishes in the past. Usually, we are expressing regret. For example, I wish I had studied more for the test. In this sentence, let's underline the past perfect tense. Notice, there is a sense of regret. Maybe the speaker ended up performing badly on this test. I wish I had driven more in high school. I've underlined the past perfect tense here as well. Again, the use of the word wish with the past perfect tense suggests a sense of regret. I wish I had talked more to him. There are certain words you may see used often with the past perfect tense. The following adverbs are often used with the past perfect tense: already, still, just, ever, or never. You may see the words before or when used as well. Let's go through some practice examples. If they arrive earlier, they catch the last train. If they had arrived earlier, they would have caught the last train. This is a conditional sentence. Notice the sentence uses the word if. As we discussed earlier, we can use the past perfect tense in conditional sentences. By the time Sarah arrived at the party, John already finished his speech. The correct answer is, by the time Sarah arrived at the party, John had already finished his speech. Here, We're using the past perfect tense to describe the earlier event in a sequence of events. We know that the first event that occurred is John giving his speech because the past perfect tense was used. The second event is Sarah's arrival to the party. We know this because the past simple tense was used. By the time we got to the cinema, the movie already start. The correct answer is, by the time we got to the cinema, the movie had already started. By the time is one of those phrases that we often use with the past perfect tense. It tells us that we're talking about time up until a certain point in the past. So, by the time we got to the cinema, the movie had already started. Again, the earlier event in the sentence is the movie starting. The second event is our arrival to the cinema. By the time the firemen arrived, the neighbors already call 911. The correct answer is, by the time the firemen arrived, the neighbors had already called 911. Again, we're talking about time up until a certain point in the past. By the time is usually associated with the past perfect tense. She never see such a beautiful sunset before. She had never seen such a beautiful sunset before. The word before is often associated with the past perfect tense. So you wouldn't say, she never saw a beautiful sunset before. Instead, you would use the past perfect tense. Again, the word before suggests that we're talking about time up until a certain point in the past. We're talking about all the time before now, which would all be in the past. To go the gym before. I had gone to the gym before. As I said before, the word before is usually associated with the past perfect tense. That's today's lesson. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you'd like to keep improving your English communication skills.